So I like to start everything in boxes. So, well, let's start with just laying out an instrument panel, just in a front view. So just basic building blocks of an interior, just basic proportions. The steering wheel is, to me, is kind of the basis of proportions. So it really depends on the size of the vehicle interior. So what I do is I do about three steering wheels, and then about a half a steering wheel on each side, just to properly space the steering wheel from the from the door, right? And the size of a steering wheel, it really depends. So this would be like an average size car. Maybe for a truck, for a pickup truck, which is quite a bit wider, you might have a full extra steering wheel width. So maybe still have the half on the left side, but on the right side you might have a full extra steering wheel. So this would be the actual steering wheel, and this is just spacing out the proper width of the instrument panel relative to the steering wheel. So generally a steering wheel is it should be about the width of the shoulders. So in terms of general size and proportioning, you want that steering wheel to be about shoulder width, so your arms go straight forward. So those are just some basic characteristics of proportions, and then when it comes to the design of the interior, really there's two schools of thought. Is this going to be something that is more geared towards spaciousness, or function, or is it geared more towards the driver? So like a sports car interior, let's say from the top view, we'll just draw a top view of an interior. A sports car tends to have this very cockpit focused, kind of wraps itself around the driver. You may have a steering wheel that's cut off at the top and bottom. A lot of the more exotic cars tend to do that. And then everything, all of your functionality is right there, next to the driver. I'm sort of looking down on the interior right now. We'll get into more of that. And then I'm just looking down so you can see it wrapping around the driver. And then a more functional vehicle or a more spacious vehicle might just be a little more straight across. Maybe you just have a little bit of a sweep towards the driver. Or maybe you have a more pronounced center console, things like that. There's a million different ways to mix this up. So generally, the construction of an instrument panel is more or less based on what I call the log. You know, it's sort of this elongated rectangle shape. And then I like to split it down the middle. And then the steering wheel, you know, we'll get more into that, but the steering wheel lives on a plane that's tilted slightly. That would be the steering column coming out of the IP. So depending on how you tilt that steering wheel, you know, you want it to exist at a slightly tilted angle relative to the log, to the main volume. So the steering wheel should be kind of angled this way a bit. So when drawing in perspective, you know, in one of my earlier tutorials, I drew multiple objects sharing the same space and sharing approach into sharing viewing angles, vanishing points, things like that. Interiors are really complex collections of those different volumes in space. They're different objects that are sharing the same space and have to be coordinated in just the right way. So these are just some basic concepts. And going forward, we're gonna start to delve into the something a little more complete here. So just a basic perspective setup. I'm gonna draw. I usually like to draw from the passenger side because you can see more of the interior. One thing when it comes to vanishing points, one of the most difficult aspects of drawing interiors is how do you end the drawing, because you know you're as an occupant, as a vehicle occupant, you're inside the vehicle. So how do you you know, your eye, obviously your field of view does not allow you to see the entire interior at one time. So how do you draw that? How do you decide where to end the interior? And that's a challenge that you're going to face on every sketch. So I'm just laying out that log, and yes, you can see a bit of a vanishing point leading ahead of the front of the vehicle. Now I'm going to drop down this center line, and I'm going to set up another plane, which is going to represent the seats. And this plane is going to exist at an angle. And again, you're going to see that that part of that seat plane is going to run off of the page a bit, and that's okay. You know, you just can't draw the whole thing. So just trying to draw something that would indicate here, and I'm just going to break this up into two seats, but indicate, you know, something that a pair of legs could pass through in between the instrument panel and the seat. You need to make sure that a pair of legs can pass through. So one thing you'll notice is that I set up this side of the interior so that you're actually somewhat you're just riding along the edge of that vanishing point. So you're not going to really have to draw this door, but you're going to have to draw, but you also don't really have to draw how the instrument panel ends. So it's just a kind of a convenient way of ending the drawing. Also with the door pocket here, the door cards, you're just gonna kind of indicate where that leads. So okay, so now I've got to set up the steering column and steering wheel. So I'm going to break up that driver's side down the middle. This is where the steering column is going to go, and again, I got to establish a bit of an angle. So if we go back to this plane here, I'm going to create this tilted plane that juts out in front of the instrument panel, and I'm gonna lay out those 3 steering wheel widths. Okay. So I'm trying to more or less make this a square, but it could be slightly rounded. So let's figure out where that steering column ends. Now, as you get more comfortable drawing interiors, you're not going to have to box everything out like this. This is just showing just generally how everything's laid out. So this is important because that steering wheel does kind of rest on a plane that's tilted from the from the main sort of ground level of the car. So we could if we want to lean back the face of the log, so it also leans back. That might help a little bit. So you can see I'm really drawing through the form. Okay, so one thing that's important as well is that you imagine where the driver's head is going to be, and that they're at eye level is going to pass through that steering wheel and read some gauges. So I see a lot of people draw interiors where you would never see the gauges through the steering wheel, and there's very few cars on the market that have gauges above the steering wheel. The only one I can think of right now is maybe a Toyota Prius or previous generation Honda Civic. Anyway, so now we have our plane for the steering wheel. I'm going to go ahead and draw that ellipse. Just like we do wheels, I'm just going to draw an X through the box to align the center of that ellipse, and then that sort of the pivot point of the steering column is gonna exist at a different angle than the center line. So now I have, and then I have to draw my 90-degree line, which is the major axis of the ellipse. So now I have the length, width, and orientation of that ellipse. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that ellipse, and I'm going to give that ellipse a little bit of thickness to it. So I'm just going to draw it this way. And again this way. Okay, so now we have kind of a nice thick steering wheel rim. Just gonna draw a few section lines around that. Okay, so and I'm just gonna round off the top of that instrument panel a little bit. Just put a little bit of curvature to line it up with the windscreen. So I'm gonna make this something of an SUV interior. So I might put some kind of a center screen on it. It's sort of floating out in front of that log, and it's and then we're gonna also put some We'll also put a screen out in front of the steering wheel. You know, and I'm drawing through the form, and I know it's getting very confusing, but that's part of the challenge of drawing interiors. They're in some ways more challenging than exteriors. So I'm going to keep this a fairly minimalist interior, just to illustrate the main boxes, the main perspective. I'm just going to put a little bit. Oh, I broke the lead. There we go. Okay. And I'm just going to start indicating some thickness on this thing. This is not going to be the world's most stylish interior. It's going to be a very sort of utilitarian, functional interior. We'll probably have to think about ventilation. So I'll put vents on either side of that screen. This is admittedly not the most advanced looking interior. I'm intentionally doing that to keep it boxy. Now, one thing about instrument panels too is so if I were to draw a side view of this thing, you know, it's not just going to be a rectangular log. The bottom of the instrument panel actually has to angle down, and the top angles up quite a bit, and that's really to create safety for the occupants in the knee area. So if you draw you know, the driver's foot and leg, you want that for safety, for crash. You want that the bottom of that instrument panel to more or less follow the knee, and then you also want to make sure that steering wheel has enough room between the seat and the steering wheel, you know, for the legs to pass through comfortably. And then, yeah, for the eye, for the viewing angle of the gauges is very important too, as well. So, to continue on, I'm just going to draw. Geez, this thing's crumbling like crazy. I'm just going to draw what we call a binnacle, which is that kind of hood that goes up and over the gauges. I'm going to call this like a mid-size SUV from last year. You see there's a little blister that comes up on top of that log. It helps to draw section lines over everything. You know, keep drawing those section lines. You can see the bottom of the instrument panel, which is ramping down along where the knees would be. And I'm just going to radius the corners of that screen. So I'm going to go ahead and just clarify that steering wheel a bit. draw the leading face of the airbag. This could be maybe a Land Rover interior. Vincent asked, is the front edge of the seat directly beneath the steering wheel? More or less probably is. I think, yeah, obviously it depends on how the seat is adjusted, but that's probably a good guideline. It's probably a good guideline. Thanks, Vincent, for asking that. And I'm just sort of designing the steering wheel to blend right into the steering column. And you might have some buttons. In subsequent demos, I'll probably do some more detailed, some specific details on seats and steering wheels. Okay, so just going to put a little bit of design into the center console. It's going to be very functional, very utilitarian. So it's going to have these sort of chamfered edges. And we also want to have some kind of shifter. So you can see, as we're talking about interiors being a collection of objects, every component of that interior is something that needs to be thought of, designed. This is a terrible pencil. Thought of, designed, and coordinated. So, getting all of these different objects to coordinate in the same space, in the same perspective, and have a similar form vocabulary. Sorry, I've got this really crumbling pencil here. So I'm kind of creating this shifter as this thing that you would grip like that. So and make sure you just keep those reference lines in mind when you're coordinating all of these different objects. See, already I'm looking at this center console and thinking it's not quite coordinated with the instrument panel. It's got a lot more angles to it. So I'm just drawing this armrest that's coming back. Let's draw the other side of the bottom of this IP. The steering column. Okay, and then as far as the seats are concerned, what I usually do in this type of view is just first of all, the top of a seat is, if you were to draw kind of a rectangular shape, and this is the front of the seat. The seat bolsters tend to get wider towards the knee area, and the size of the bolster really depends on the type of vehicle. Like a truck or an SUV tends to have a fairly wide, flat seat, whereas a sports car has has bigger, deeper bolsters that are more pronounced, and that's just to keep the the driver planted in the seat. So in an SUV, it's a fairly wide, flat seat. I'm just gonna give it a fairly simple design. Where the center of the seat is fairly parallel, and in this view, like, you can decide whether you want to try and draw the back of the seat in this view. I will probably just leave the back of the seat invisible. Just because it's you got to end the sketch somewhere. So as you get into the passenger seat, it's coming right at you, so you're not going to get a lot of perspective in terms of the form of it. So you really got to depend on those section lines. So and then as far as the door is concerned, it's really up to you as far as how far you want to go with that. Given that I drew all this stuff in here, normally I would draw some kind of an A-pillar. Since I was illustrating up in that corner, I'll just leave the A-pillar out. But I'm just going to draw the top of the door. You're going to want to have some kind of a thickness to it. And then the armrest, you want it to be slightly above the bolster of the seat, and it's gonna kind of taper in. I'm just sort of making this up as I go. So you can see what a complicated thing it is to draw an interior. As far as just to coordinate all of these different objects. I might generally want to keep the rendering of an interior, even in a digital rendering, you want to keep it fairly light. I've seen a lot of renderings get overdone, and I think the ones that I get drawn to are the lighter, kind of more airy ones. So even the shadows beneath the instrument panel, I tend to stay fairly light on them, but I'll probably just darken the space between the IP and the seat, so at least graphically, you get a sense of that void. Draw some texturing where the speaker would be. And you're drawing a section line through the door. And I might just put a little bit of shading on the bottom of that instrument panel, just to give it help it recess into that void area. And so, given that this is a drawing demo, not a rendering demo, I'm gonna kind of leave it at that. And then I'm gonna move on to more of a sports car interior, just something a little more dynamic and exciting.